Fisherman's Post. More fish, more often.
Hello and welcome to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. This episode is titled Winter Trout in the Pamlico River Creeks. I'm going to be featuring Captain Zack of UFO Charters, and he operates out of the Pamlico River and its tributaries. And we're going to be talking about where these winter trout go, why they go there, what they do there, and then ultimately how to target and catch them effectively. I'm your host, Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post, and Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community since 2003. We've been bringing you fishing reports, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, premium content, and here in our latest and greatest, the Saltwater Podcast Series, where we reach out to our captain and guide friends from up and down the North Carolina coast and ask them to share with us their thoughts, their insights on how to catch more fish more often. In this pursuit of more fish more often, I'm joined by podcast co-host David Harden of Harden Creative Media.
Hello, Gary.
David Harden, welcome to another show.
What is going on?
Man, I'm going to talk here with Zack. We're going to talk about trout, which is, I would say, certainly the most popular inshore species in North Carolina saltwater.
I like trout. I've caught a few. Never unsupervised, though.
What does that mean?
Well, like I've always been like with the captain, like somebody knows what they're doing. Because when I'm by myself, it's like all the trout that I catch look like lizardfish.
They look like lizardfish?
They look like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they're trout.
Do they smell like lizardfish?
They look like lizardfish, yeah.
Do they taste like lizardfish?
I don't know. I haven't gone that far.
And popular species, maybe I better qualify before I start getting emails. Winter saltwater, the most popular. But it might be the most popular, period. I don't know. Like, that's debatable, and I don't get into the debates.
It's a job for Google.
It is, man. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Trout is the name of the game in the wintertime.
Cool. Well, before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. First up, we have Port City Signs and Graphics. Sabrina and the crew making signs all over the place. You can see them anywhere you go, around the Cape Fear area and even beyond the Cape Fear area.
Yeah, I think next year I'm looking at a couple of projects because, as I've told you many times, Port City Signs handles our work. So I'm going to get some feather flags. I need some new feather flags so we make more pop when we're set up for our tournaments, our events, our fishing schools. And then I might have her do like a wrap on the enclosed trailer. Not the boat, but the enclosed trailer.
That would be good.
I agree, man.
They do a good job with that stuff.
I think Sabrina and I are talking about that over the winter.
Well, before we move on to the next sponsor, let's play our little game about Guess the Sign. I'm going to show you two signs, and you tell me, just by looking at the sign, which one was made by Port City Signs and Graphics, which one was not made by Port City Signs and Graphics.
I understand the rules of the game.
Here we go. Here's sign number one. Sign one says, buy one burger for the price of two and receive a second burger absolutely free.
That's a good deal.
So it's a good deal.
Man, more stores should do that.
Here's sign number two. It's a sign outside a Groove Jet Salon Company. It's like a street sign. That
is a simple hanging sign, but yet it is definitely sharp, man. In its simplicity. Man, I tell you, Sabrina and crew do good work, man. That is a good looking sign. Do you get your haircut at Groove Jet?
I don't, but maybe I will now. Maybe we should. Maybe they'll sponsor the podcast.
You should get it cut somewhere. That's what I'm saying.
It's been 5 weeks. It's been long. It's getting bad. Yes. Shaggy.
Me, I'm always perfectly groomed, but you need to.
That is true. Next sponsor up is yourboatmoney.com and New Coast.
Scott Bradshaw. Let's look at that. Go ahead.
At the end.
Scott Bradshaw, you have our attention, sir. You have our attention. Marine finance. And like I try to brand here in the podcast, man, all about information, all about relationships. Of course, he wants to help you finance a boat purchase, but he wants to do it the right way. And I have a marine finance true false.
Oh, okay. All right.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So again, this is a Scott Bradshaw, yourboatmoney.com, New Coast, true false marine finance.
Okay.
In South Carolina, outboards are titled just like a car is titled.
I'm going to say that it's true.
And you're good. I mean, it is true.
I think, yeah. I think Yeah.
What do you mean think? You didn't know that. You guessed.
I guessed, but it was an educated guess.
So what are you trying to tell me you think, man? You just guessed.
Yeah, it's good. 50-50.
Good work. Again, Scott Bradshaw, yourboatmoney.com, and New Coast.
Next up, we have Marine Warehouse Center.
My good friends at Marine Warehouse Center
Yes.
that keep the fish post boat on the water.
That's right. They send us a little video.
All right, let's check it out.
Matt with Marine Warehouse, excited to give you guys a huge update. We're now carrying Seaborn and Spider boat line. Of course, we have the newest models of Carolina Skiff, Sailfish, Sea Chaser, and Pan Marine. With over 60 boats in stock at a Wilmington location, let's schedule a sea trial and let's get you on the water today.
Man, that's a pump 'em up clip.
Rocking it out.
And then there's our opening clip, which is like Brian Weeks kind of like saying, "Hey, you know, maybe pay attention to us."
It's all good. Don't give Brian a hard
He
time.
doesn't listen. He doesn't watch or listen to this podcast. I dare him to. Like, then I'll apologize. I'll apologize on camera if you watch this, Brian, and then reach out to me.
Okay, that'll be good.
Well, you know the deal.
That's right. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast, just contact the Fisherman's Post Office. But I know we got to get to a joke first, right?
We have to get
Okay.
because Terrell. Oh my God, he blows up my phone as it is, David. If you were to jump me and not let me tell a Terrell joke, then I would probably be answering the phone over Thanksgiving.
Oh my God. All right.
And it's not even. I'm going to tell you up front. I'm all about managing expectations, and I'm going to tell you up front. It's not a good one.
That's okay.
All right.
I'm ready. I'm ready to hear.
So
a good
to be
one.
clear, Terrell's joke, not mine.
Gotcha.
What did Beethoven become after he died?
What did Beethoven become after he died? I do not know.
A decomposer.
This is a good one. That's like a joke a sixth grade science teacher would make.
That's a good point.
and the students wouldn't like it.
And they would not like it.
They
You're
wouldn't
right.
like it, but he would think it was funny.
All right, now we can move on, David.
Now
Thank you.
let's move on. If you'd like to become a sponsor, just contact the Fisherman's Post Office, and we will hook you up.
I like to plug our member content. So again, if you're a fan of the podcast, you want to support the podcast, then if you become a premium content member, one, you get early access to all podcasts released 1 week before the public access, and you get access to our bonus content feature. And again, that's a 10 to 15 minute conversation with each guest following the normal public podcast. So you get access to that. You only get access to that being a premium content member. Plus, you get access to our weekly fishing reports in audio and video format. We're actually in bi-weekly now from November to February. We're bi-weekly, but March through October, every week, up and down the North Carolina coast, up to 11 reports from 11 different geographical zones on the North Carolina coast. Great deal. Great gift idea.
It is. Hint, hint.
I think this is getting released pretty close to Christmas. It might be too late, but you know what? Whatever. Get him a late gift instead of a tie.
You'll still have time. You'll still have time.
Instead of a tie, get him a great gift, something he might not buy himself, but he would love. And that's what I got. I tell you what, man, I'm going to talk with Zack Bland about trout, about winter trout. He's going to tell me about all the trout that I'm not catching with him, even though he likes to bring up, hey, we're going to go fishing one day. And then I'm going to come back to you, David, for David's best takeaway.
All right. I'll
And
be ready.
since you have caught trout before, I'm going to have higher expectations for David's best takeaway.
Well, I'll be listening extra careful.
All right, deal. Well, now it is my pleasure, my privilege to say hello, Captain Zack Bland of UFO Charters, operating out of the Pamlico River and its tributaries. We're going to talk about winter trout in the Pamlico River creeks. How you doing, Zack?
Hey, how is everybody? How's Gary? How's the other guy?
Are you going to make it that easy for me to talk smack to you that you didn't even remember my podcast partner's name, and he's the one pressing the button? Man, hey, I want you to use the Snapchat filters we have, and I want you to put like unicorn horns on them. I want you to go ahead and make Zack look real good using the filters you have, David, because he couldn't remember your name.
It's okay.
David. Yeah. David.
So listen, Zack, even with all those trophies in the background, no one gets on the podcast without answering two questions. You tell me you're ready for the two questions. I'll give you question number one.
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
Question number one, pretty standard. Why should David, why should anyone listen to anything you have to say about a trout?
Well, Well, everybody has their own opinions. Personally, I've got a lot of time on the water. Let's see, I'm 28 years old now. I've been fishing as far back as I can remember, especially with my father, not necessarily trout fishing. I got a long history of growing up bass fishing. So the pursuit of behind fishing has always been there for me, not necessarily for trout. When I got old enough to kind of be able to fish on my own, got my driver's license and all that, I went on I spent a lot of times fishing in the mountains, a different type of trout, fishing in the rivers and the streams. And I really learned if you were going to be a good fisherman, you had to sit down and you had to think about things and analyze the water. And eventually I realized that I really had a knack for fishing. Now, I hadn't found my love for the saltwater fishing or the speckled trout or any of that. I had caught them at those points in my life, but I think it was, 2019. I had gone fishing with a buddy of mine from work, and we went Swan's Quarter, somewhere like that, towards the sound part of the regions, and I caught my first citation trout. And that's been almost 5.5 years ago. And I think every weekend since then, I've fished at least once speckled trout fishing. Sometimes I'll fish upwards of I like to fish 2 or 3 days a week, but I spend a lot of time fishing on the weekends. I fish during the week when I can. I've got a lot of friends. I wouldn't be where I'm at without a lot of the help I've received from my friends, older friends and younger friends. It being in a good network, it really helps you keep on the fish as far as not having to work as hard to find them. And that's really helped me out a lot too, different techniques, picking up different things from different people, not necessarily being dependent on those people, but being able to take all of those things I learned from all of the guys that love the trout just as much as I do myself, and applying everything I learned just fishing in general from previous types of fishing, the fishing in the mountains and all the bass fishing I've done growing up, which really the bass fishing helps me out the most as far as targeting these trout. But I mean, I really think about it a lot. I spend probably more time than I should thinking about it, and there's probably a lot of people out there that can say that themselves, which is kind of funny. But I get really involved. I don't get bothered by it. A lot of people go fishing and they don't catch fish, and they always catch fish and they get beat up about it. But I try to be humble. I try to take things as it is, and everybody knows it's fishing, and I'm really dedicated to it. I don't like to have bad days on the water. Everybody's bad days are subjective. 8 trout, a limited trout is great to somebody, and then to other people it may not be nothing, maybe an average day. So I try to put myself in other shoes, and I think that helps a lot for people to listen. Put yourself in their shoes and see how would they fish. How are you fishing your creek? How do you go about thinking about fishing? Those types of questions I ask myself, and also ask a lot of the other guys that I fish with. There's all types of questions we ask about fishing: the whys, the whens, the where, the how. So I think being prevalent and asking those questions for the last 5 or 6 years to anybody I could possibly make friends with, the bigger trout they caught, the more trout they caught, the more I wanted to be friends with them. And I've been fortunate to become friends with the ones I have. So I really want to dedicate the friendships I've made with a lot of the hard hours and days not catching fish to being somewhat successful with where I'm at now.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I think that there's something happened sound wise. So man, I'm going to accept that that is an acceptable answer to number 1. And so I'm going to move on to number 2. Are you ready for question number 2?
Let's see if I can answer it.
All right, question number 2. I actually have a 2-parter here. And of course, man, what am I going to do if you're UFO Charters? I wonder what question number 2 is going to be about. So can you tell me the month? Well, tell me the day. When is World UFO Day?
I have no idea.
All right, I'll ask you to guess the month. What month is World UFO Day in?
What is World UFO Day?
That's when people celebrate unidentified flying objects. The name of your charter business.
I have no idea. I couldn't be
July
honest
2nd. It's going to be July 2nd.
July. Why July? Is that
I'm asking the questions here. You're answering the questions. And you got another UFO question, all right? I want you to guess within $50, you can buy a $10 million alien abduction insurance policy for how much? And you just got to get within $50
How much a month?
a year.
$950.
Man, I'll sell you 2 policies right now, and then I'll go online and buy it for $24.95. See what I did there with the $50? I threw you off, man. $24.95, man. You can get a $10 million alien abduction insurance policy. But enough about that. Let's get to winter trout in the Pamlico River creeks. Again, what you're going to tell me, or where we're going to start the conversation, where I think everyone has their main question, like, hey, man, where are these fish? Like, I can do everything right, but where are they?
Well, I guess it really boils down. To a lot of people, it boils down to where you live at. You know, what portion of the state do you live in? You know, a lot of people that fish the Pamlico coming from the eastern Piedmont region. There's a lot of locals that fish the Pamlico. You know, Washington, Belhaven, Aurora, Bath. Those are some of the main towns on the Pamlico, and they've got several locals that love to fish. But you know, of course, throughout the summer, the fish, a lot of the trout are out in the sound, you know, in the saltier water. But as things start to cool down, generally by December, which would be the month we're, you know, kind of targeting, most of these fish will be in some type of creek somewhere related to the Pamlico, whether it be off the main river of the Pamlico, off of the Intercoastal Waterway, or one of its local creeks close by. Pamlico River has several tributaries that go into it as well. You know, a lot of those trout end up in just about every creek there is in North Carolina. If it's connected to saltwater in any shape, way, or fashion, whether it's 30 miles away or 5 miles away, odds are by December, January, there's probably some sort of class of trout in there. A lot of people think they have to go to where they're hearing people catch trout in order to, you know, actually do well or target them or find them. But generally, a lot of it boils down to kind of how the river system as a whole sets up as you lead into December, January, you know, October, November. Those are pretty important months on where the different migratory schools end up at before they get pushed up into a creek. Not necessarily, yes, they'll be in every creek. I used to tell people the general rule of thumb, the bigger the creek, the deeper the water is in the back of the creek, the more trout will end up being in that creek. And a lot of those deeper, bigger creeks kind of, for instance, South Creek around Aurora would be a big, deep creek. Durham's Creek's got some deep water in the back of it. North Creek doesn't really have as much deep water. I wouldn't classify that as a deep creek. Pamlico River itself has a lot of deep water, and then you're thinking Pamlico Creek, there's Belhaven, Pantego Creek, and then the actual headwaters of Pamlico River itself has a lot of deep water. And by deep water, I reference, you know, anything over 8 foot is getting pretty deep to me. You can catch trout year round, 6 foot or less, but generally in the wintertime when it gets super, super cold, a lot of people tend to have better success in the back of a creek in a deeper hole. 8 to 20 foot. There's some deeper holes in North Carolina, but they don't typically produce the amount of trout that 20 foot or less does. Anything over 20 foot is just hard to fish. But for the most part, all of the creeks will hold fish. If you got a creek that gets real narrow and real deep in the back, and 20 foot of water, there's a lot of water in there that can sustain a lot of fish. Some years are different than others. They go to different creeks. Even from month to month, they go to different creeks. It kind of changes when they get there. You know, a lot of times this year you get a big wave of fish that push in early, and they go to all these different creeks, and then all of a sudden they're gone. You know, where'd they go? They moved to a different creek. They went further back until it gets super, super cold. A lot of those fish will move from creek to creek until you get water temperatures in the 40s. I like to break things up kind of 45 degrees to 55 degrees, and then 55 degrees to 65 degrees, and then 65 to 75, kind of in 10-degree increments will help depict on what portion of the creek I want to go in. But generally by December, January, especially if it's a colder year, those fish are going to be in the last third of the creek, the very back, the deeper water. A lot of those creeks, the reason, I guess we could lean into the reason why they go there, you know, most of these fish are obviously the water temperature is dropping. The sound gets pretty volatile at a certain point when it gets cold enough, and then you throw a lot of wind on top of there. The bait fish just can't. They just can't do it. They're going to look for safety or a better or refuge or less volatile water, something more consistent, and they go to the back of these creeks. I mean, you know, anybody that trout fishes in the winter and is fishing in a creek, they're by now, if they don't know, your number one rule is find the bait, find the fish. So obviously there's a reason those fish go to those types of places, and it just boils down to bait fish. You know, those fish are moving. It's their natural process to move and migrate. At least what I've observed over the last 5 or 6 years of my life is they go from one extreme to the other, and it's fascinating to keep track of. If you're able to keep track of it, it's not easy to keep track of. You know, a couple months out of the year, they're moving so much, but in the winter, they're pretty easy to keep track of. And I feel like I'm getting off track here. What are we talking about? Why they're there? Let's
man. No, you're doing good, and like we're following it. So, you know, you're telling us about the creeks, the back third. You're telling us about the deeper water, and then why they go there. I know that, you know, we can continue that, but I just know my audience, and so they would love more on where, you know, just saying deeper holes. So like, and find the bait, find the fish. So in late December or in January, is it just about finding holes? Does it have anything to do with the shoreline? Does it have anything to do with any kind of structure? Or is it just finding deeper pockets of water in the backs of creeks?
Let's see. Let me think about that for a second. So it's a hard subject because in the last few years, especially the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, going back historically, North Carolina's always had issues with cold stuns and fish kills and yada, 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 yada. You know, 2 or 3 years, the fish die off. But we've had a really strong, I think, almost 7 or 8 years now of no fish kills. So to me, I'm a younger angler. You know, I've only been doing this 5 years, but our generations of trout is constantly changing. Every year is somebody's learning something new. Somebody's finding trout places you would never think trout to be. And after a certain period of time, it almost blends together to be too much to say there's one specific thing you want to go to the back of this creek and look for. To me, when I approach a creek, if I know there's deep water in the back, say there's 10, 12 foot of water in the back, I like to look for bends in the creek. Typically when you have a bend, you're going to have a deep hole on the bend side, and then on the inside, the point kind of might be a little shallower. You might have some type of shoal. Sometimes the contours can be extremely drastic in the back of some of these creeks, especially like the small, narrow ones. I'm trying to think. Durham's Creek would be a good one to reference. You know, you get back there around the bridges back there, it gets narrow, it gets deep. You go right by the bank, it might be 3 foot, and then 10 foot off of the bank, it's 12 to 13 foot. I like to fish places like that when it gets cold. Sometimes you want to, if it's going to be a warmer day or colder day, you may want to target the deeper portion of the hole or the shallower portion. Or another way to look at most of these creeks, they maintain a certain depth level until you get to the back, and then it's almost like, we call it the belly of a creek. You say you'll have a quarter mile of 4 to 6 foot water, and then all of a sudden the creek hangs a right or left, and then it drops off super deep and gets 8 to 10, 12 foot deep. Sometimes those fish, depending on the current, you know, we do have a wind driven current in the Pamlico, so some of those holes will fish differently. You know, if you got a long flat leading to a deep hole, those fish might be on the long flat one day if the sun's out, and you know they're trying to warm up and intercept some bait moving in and out of there. And then if it gets cold and rainy and miserable, they're going to probably be down in the deeper portions. And there's lots of places like that, but the number one key is life. We always look for life everywhere we go. We're not looking for docks or or specific types of bank transitions or, rock jetties or anything like that. I mean, most of these creeks we're going in, the only thing you have to go on is, brown reeds, and the water gets low. You can see the black tannic mud line and all that. And generally, a rule of thumb, we kind of like to go by, most of these creeks have bridges, and it always boils down to fishing between two bridges. No matter how we look at it, there's several creeks. If you look at them and say, okay, there's a bridge in the back and there's a bridge right here, a lot of the times those fish are going to be somewhere in between those bridges. I don't know why it works out like that, but it does. I mean, there's several creeks like that. CB's Pungo Creek has 2 bridges. Bellhaven has 2 bridges. The back of Pungo River has 2 bridges. A lot of these places have 2 bridges, and it just seems to correlate well for some reason. I don't know why. Not that it really means anything, but for the most part, we use electronics and we go looking for the bait, because the bait's the whole reason why the fish are there. And the only reason why the bait fish really go there is in the wintertime, the back of those creeks aren't subject to, the bigger water cools off a lot faster. If it gets cold and windy, the wind will cool off the water a lot more. So the further back in the creek, the more protected it is, the calmer it'll be. The water temperature won't fluctuate as much. The bait fish won't get pushed around as much. And when it gets really cold, that's what they prefer. And then you kind of got the runoff. A lot of these creeks get a lot of runoff from the fields and stuff like that, and that helps influence bait movements as well. I like to think, those minnows got to eat something. If you think about it, the chain of life, how it works out, those predatory fish are going to follow the bait. But if you could keep up with the bait just as well as where those trout are, I mean, you're going to find them. They're going to follow them.
I got a big question, man. I didn't want to interrupt, but I want to ask you before I forget. So for you in the Pamlico tributary system, I guess the question is a couple, like, what is the typical winter bait that they're feeding on? Is it minnows, as you mentioned? And you talked about, so you're finding them more on electronics. You're not seeing bait in the winter months. It's more finding them on the machine. And is that just a straight up machine, or are you guys all now like side scan dependent to really hone in on bait?
Well, so I guess every fall there's a transition that the trout go on. They spend a lot of the latter parts of the summer and early fall feeding on shrimp and other forage they find out in the saltwater. But generally, when you reach a certain degree temperature, we'll say once the water starts to get below 60 degrees and you start getting into the mid 50s and below, they're really dependent on finfish, mullet, menhaden. Honestly, when they get in the back of those creeks, they're the apex predators back there, especially those larger 5 to 8, 9, 10 pound trout. Nothing in there is going to eat them. They can eat basically anything in there. I think sometimes they eat brim. I'd imagine they'd eat a crappie if they were back there and they were hungry enough. It's not necessarily always menhaden and mullet, even though that's what we see. Visually, we see mullet most places. Mullet don't necessarily show up the same as a ball of menhaden does on electronics. We use side scan. A lot of people like to use live scope. That's a new thing. It's a great tool. It's just another tool, just like side scan and down scan and all that. But me personally, I don't use it. I had it. It's kind of time consuming for me. But our side scan is a great tool, especially in areas you haven't fished before and you don't quite know where you're at and you don't know any of the bottom contours or where the structure, the stumps, or stuff like that might be. Just at a safety standpoint, it's nice to know. Say you go idle to the back of a creek, you idle all the way back there with your side scan on, and generally by now, if you're going to dedicate to electronics and you spend $1,000 or $2,000, you're going to have a pretty good unit. You're going to be able to visually see what's somewhat close to the boat if you spend a lot of time looking at it. I spend a lot of time looking at mine, especially when I got clients on the boat. I sit at the helm and just troll a motor my way wherever we're fishing and stare, and we idle around a lot and look at them, and eventually it just becomes a clear picture to you. And it really is a great tool. We don't necessarily go in a creek, oh, look, there they are. They're 30 feet back there behind me, over there by that stump, and we catch them. But it provides confidence, and never a good angler knows that confidence is the best bait you can have in your box. So, you know, we're seeing lots of bait, or you're seeing lots of bait balls, and then there's some bigger, larger returns, you know, some bigger white marks, or however you got your screen set up. And it just makes me feel like I'm in a better area versus, man, there's nothing on the screen. I don't understand how we can catch anything, because generally when we're catching them, we're marking some type of fish or some type of activity, some type of life. Gars are a big thing in the back of these creeks. These creeks they're brackish water, but some of them get really fresh and some of them get really salty. It's a lot of water that moves around in the Pamlico, and that's another thing to keep up with. That's pretty important with the trout. But man, the electronics, they really do help out a lot. I wouldn't dedicate everything to them, but they provide a lot of confidence. They help us out. They help me know where those deep holes are. You know, hey, this one goes from 6 to 16 foot, and the drop off is in between those two trees back there. So we just kind of focus in that area. It'll help you position your boat a lot better. That's very important when trout fishing. I've learned over the years that how to maintain boat control and where to place the boat and why to place the boat and how to use your trolling motor, how to use your power pole, how to use an anchor if you don't have those things. All of that stuff, man. It all boils down to how confident you can make yourself in an area to catch these fish. Because, like I said, at the end of the day, it boils down to they're in every creek.
All right. So I want to make sure I know we can talk, you know, for a long time about trout. Any trout angler who wants to can talk a long time about it. That's one of the cool things about trout anglers. But I want to make sure we don't run out of time. So I know you have a bunch of baits back there. So this might be a good time to segue. Show me some of the popular stuff you throw in the wintertime, and not just show it to me, but tell me what is, you know, a couple of your favorite applications, you know, conditions, habitat, or whatever it is where you throw that particular type of bait.
So December, January, mid-December, January, I've got a plethora of baits over here. We'll say I know I'm going to target the latter third of a deeper creek I may know about, whether it's the back of Bellhaven or the back of Pungo Creek or the back of South Creek. And I know I want to fish in deeper water. It's cold. It's 42 degrees outside. The water temperature's 55 and below. I know those fish are somewhere around those deeper holes. I like to fish a lot of soft plastics, anywhere from paddle tails like this. Not sure how well you can see that. Straight tail grubs, zoom flukes. Everybody knows about the slick and the slick junior. Most people do. These are great baits to have in your arsenal. This one has a larger profile. This one is smaller. They sink straight down, which me personally, I have a lot better success with wintertime trout jigging, more of a up and down with the bait than a kind of dragging it like a lot of people tend to do. They just pull the rod. I like to snap it real quick. Any of these natural colors work good. I like the natural colors in the cleaner water. Also like the darker colors, kind of the two-tone, a little darker. This is a Wiggle-O, I think, and then this is just a typical zoom fluke, baby bass with a chartreuse tail or something like that. I would usually go with like a 1/4 ounce jig head if it's 8 foot or more. If it's really cold, I'll size it down to like a 1/16 ounce jig head just to get that slow fall, because that's important. Another good wintertime bait are these, the DOA baits that everybody throws for the big drum. I like to fish with these. They really hover in the water really good. They got a big air pocket that helps keep them kind of buoyant, you know, get that slow float. And you can also cut the tail a little bit and split it, and that helps a lot. I throw a lot of those types of baits.
Hey, before you move on, because I want to ask a question about the soft plastics, because you talked about just jigging them up and down. So are you telling me, like, we're targeting a big hole, you're going to cast it out there and you're going to jig it up and down but not move it back to you? Like, I'm wondering about covering ground, covering water.
So if say you're in your bend, okay, and you know you've got a sweep, It's deep over there on the other side. You're pulled up on the shallow side. Your current's right to left, left to right. I know the closer the bait gets to the boat, the more vertical my bait is, just because of the nature of the angle down to the bait out the rod. Further out you throw, a lot of times you'll have to pop the bait harder. Sometimes if you got a good current, a lot of times you can pick it up real quick and let the current just kind of sweep it down. I call it snap jigging. You're trying to really snap that bait to get that fish's attention, because 90% of the fish you catch jigging, they're going to hit it while the bait's falling. I used to like to tell people the fish don't necessarily care about how hard or how high you pull the bait off the bottom. And it's important to know when you're on the bottom, not necessarily be on the bottom, but to be able to tell, hey, my bait just hit the bottom. I need to jig it. I need to give it a 1-2. I usually do 1, 2, or 3. I don't go 6, 7 foot off the bottom. I might go 2 or 3 foot, especially if it's deep, because those fish, they're deep. I mean, they dwell on the bottom. A lot of them do. The bigger ones, not so much, but a lot of the 18 to 22 pound, 2 or 3 pound trout, they'll get down there and they just act like catfish. Basically, when I catch them with catfish sometimes in the back of these creeks, and the situations work great with live bait too, if you slip corking or whatever that may be. But the snap jigging seems to get the best results to me. The lighter jig head you go, the harder it is to maintain contact with the bait. I generally like to try to do a quarter ounce if possible. I seem to be able to feel it. Sometimes if it gets windy and my clients are complaining about not being able to feel the bait, I'll put a heavier, like a half ounce on or something like that. And if those fish are there and you feel like your bait is falling too quickly, you can go lighter. You can put a bigger profile bait on. You can go to a paddle tail. That'll help your bait fall a lot slower. And that's really important in a wintertime fishery is, those fish are on the bottom looking up. They're going to be nearby bait balls. They're looking for injured fish that they could easily pick off, especially those schoolies where there's a bunch of them in there. And it seems to get their attention better, the quickness of the jigging. If you want to throw a paddle tail, me personally, I like to throw a bigger one, like a 5 or 6 inch paddle tail, and reel it real slow. If it's deep, let it get to the bottom and then just give it a slow, steady retrieve. You might want to flick it every now and then, just jig it a little bit. But for the most part, if I'm jigging in the wintertime, I'm letting my bait go all the way down to the bottom and then doing it just like that. And then letting it keep going all the way down and then kind of like that. It wouldn't necessarily be straight up and down, but it's more like this than it is straight.
Okay.
A horizontal movement.
All right. I follow, man. Let's go back to the table then, man. Show me some more options.
Okay. It's a warmer day. Water temperatures 55 degrees and up. These fish are still in the back of these creeks. A lot of times they don't go anywhere. They might just go from shallow to deep, or if it's a drastic temperature change and it warms up 15 degrees, they might change creeks. Yeah. But if it's minute changes and they're in the back of this creek, they're not going anywhere, your fluctuation is early 40 degrees to early 50 degrees, then yeah, they might go up and get on a flat and warm up on the sun. That's typical. A lot of people like to say that those trout will always get on those mud flats late in the evening. So if you feel like you want to target a little bit shallower water, say, 6 foot or less, typically I don't go less than 2 foot in the wintertime unless it's really warm. Usually when the fish start leaving the creeks after February, you can kind of fish a little shallower. But generally, near the deep holes you jig in, those fish will frequent flats or ditches or the mouths of ditches. And, we've caught trout on topwater baits in December and January with water temperatures above 52 degrees. So I'm not going to say that's the magic number, but what I've noticed catching, hey, we just caught a nice fish on topwater. What's the water temperature? Oh, it's 52 degrees. Oh, wow, that's crazy. So I like to throw the spooks, the one knockers. I like a bigger profile. especially if you're seeing a bunch of those big corncob mullet. I really like this pink and chrome one. It's always been one of my go-tos. I caught the biggest trout I've caught in my life come on this bait right here. So it's a good bait. It's not necessarily the best color for wintertime, but it will aggravate a big trout and it will work. A lot of guys like to throw the peanuts. I've got a couple of them right here. I think these were painted by Charles Anderson. He does a really, really fantastic job on our baits. But these are the smaller peanuts. They've got a little bit different profile than your typical spook. They have a more curvature to them, and they also sound different. You know, this is a little bit more aggressive, one knot, and this one has a lot of little BBs in it. Me personally, if they're going to hit a topwater bait, they're going to hit a topwater bait. I don't have much preference. When it boils down to me choosing a topwater bait, it comes down to size of the bait and how easily I can work the bait. Is it windy? Is it choppy? Do they want it real slow? Because usually in the wintertime, if you're going to catch them on topwater, you're going to have to work it painfully slow. You're going to have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, a constant pace, but extremely slow. If you get around them, they will let you know it is totally possible. We've caught some really nice fish on some of those shallow flats, back of Bellhaven, back of CB's, back of South Creek, Durham's Creek, all over the ICW, anywhere nearby a deep water pocket that trout frequent on a warm day. Say it's warm, the air temperature is significantly warmer than the water, and it's cloudy and overcast. I don't know, for some reason they like to jump out of the water, it seems like, and these things work really good. Even these off the wall colors, they don't look like anything you've ever seen out there, but they will get a trout's attention and they will work. Some other hard baits we like to throw, unless you got any questions about the topwater in the wintertime.
No, man, I enjoyed that. Show me some more hard baits.
So of course, everybody knows what this is. It's a mirror lure. When I first started trout fishing, I went down the loophole. I bought 300 mirror lures. I got a bunch of them. I've caught so many fish on them over the years, but I just don't fish with them anymore. I can't seem to cover the water like I used to with them. But if I do fish with a mirror lure, I'm going to seek out a larger mirror lure like this MR27, just because I can cast it further. I can cover more water. I can work it harder. I feel like I got a better chance at a bigger fish. I used to really like to throw the Clear Eye series, the ones that look like real fish, mullet and the pinfish and the shad or something like that. I used to throw a lot of those. They work great, especially when it gets sub 50 water degree temperature and you're in an area where the fish are a little bit shallower. Because, this thing will take forever to get down super deep. You can throw a 18 or a 28 or something like that and get down there a lot faster. It's just, it's kind of slower for me. I know a lot of people love it, and they will definitely catch you fish, don't get me wrong. But it's just, if you're going to fish it in the winter deep in the back of those holes, it's going to take forever to get down. You'll be better off with the jig. But if you go shallower, they work well. You will catch some fish. On some of those warmer days, you get in the back of those creeks and say, you're not necessarily feeling like you're going to catch one on top water, but they're up there, doing whatever trout do. They do some crazy stuff. They're up there sunning 3-4 foot of water. These guys work good. This is a double D. It's basically like the 27 mirror lure. It's a little bit bigger. It has a little bit bigger profile. It's got, I'm not sure, not off the top of my head, it doesn't sink like a mirror lure. It stays probably within 6 to 8 inches below the surface, depending on how you work it. We get some good result on these, especially on the days where we know those fish are looking up. It's warmer. It's a warmer day in the winter. They're going to take advantage of the warmer day. The bait fish will go to the banks a little bit, and you might see some popping. Those fish will come up and hit stuff like this. And don't be scared to throw these baits over deep water on a nice warm day. Those fish will definitely come up. I think we've caught several fish on these baits, top water baits, mirror lures, jerk baits, which is another thing I'll roll into over top of deep water without having to be on the bottom. So it's not necessarily, you don't have to find the deepest hole you can find and jig in it, but that's where a lot of the life is going to be. And you just kind of have to break it down from there. The jerk baits, the lip jerk baits, we throw a lot of those. They work good when it's too windy for a mirror lure and you can't fish a mirror lure because you throw it out there and it just, it's gone. It's over there where the wind's blowing at, especially if you're like me and you want to throw into the wind or throw against the wind or just do something you shouldn't be doing. The jerk baits work really well because they help us get down into water column. These are 2 Rapalas right here. I got a smaller one. I think this is a rip stop, and then this is a shadow wrap number 9. I personally like the number 9 and the number 11. They kind of got a little bit fatter side to them. They give a good menhaden profile. They don't go super deep. It's got a little pinky sized bill on it. It'll probably go 2 or 3 foot deep. They make deeper jerk baits, but like I said, if you want to fish deep, if you have the patience, use a deep sinking mirror lure or just throw a jig. But if you want to fish 6 foot, 7 foot or less, these jerk baits work really well. Those fish, especially if the water's clear, those fish can see these things flashing very well. I like a lot of purples, purple gold, purple silver. These both have purple backs. It's hard to go wrong with a purple anything really. A lot of those trout we catch, they come up with that purple sheen on them. So that general color scheme works well. These are a little bit different jerk baits. These are more like bass fishing jerk baits. I'm not 100. I think this is a KBD jerk bait, and this is a Jugan Squad jerk bait. I've caught fish on all these lures. Some of them are pretty beat up, but they're just a little different. They're out of the norm. We like to throw different baits at the fish. They see different things in the winter. They respond well. They get tired of seeing mirror lures every day. Fishing pressure is a thing. That is another thing that we can talk about. And then everybody's favorite, the soft baits, the soft hard baits, or whatever you want to call them, the soft twitch baits, the Paul Browns, the Corkies, whatever. There's several different types. We like to throw those too. They sink a lot better. They got a really good wobble when they sink, especially these big Corkies. That's their trademark. They do like that as they're sinking. And these guys kind of have a little shimmy too. The soft dines, the mirror lure soft dines, they work really great. You can fish these like a jig, throw them out there. If you're targeting your deeper water holes and there's trout are there, throw it out there and let it wobble all the way down and just give it a couple bumps. Fish it how you want. They work great. A lot of people bend them. They like to take them and bend them down like that. They say it gives them different action. It's just another tool we use, another tactic we like to use, especially if we know those fish are there and actively feeding. It's a little different when you want to search for active fish versus fishing for fish that are in the back of that creek.
Man, I guess my question is with these baits is, are you a big believer in fluoro, and how sensitive, I'm sure you are, but how sensitive are you to like the size of the fluoro? You can tell me about leader length, but more like, do you, in the wintertime, can you go over 15 or do you need to stay 12 or 10? Like what do you personally do?
Oh man, I've got several spools of this old Berkeley Trilene big game line. You could get it at Walmart. It's stuff that's been handed down. I don't typically buy a leader. If I buy a leader, I might get the Yozuri leader. I usually don't. I usually run 15 pounds, 17 pound. I use monofilament. I feel like my knots sense better with monofilament. I don't really have a preference. I'm not biased. I'm not fishing around structure. I don't really have problems with breaking fish off. If I do, it's from a chafed knot. And as far as like a leader, yeah, I run a leader on all my rods. I run anywhere from 18 to 24-inch leaders. I know a lot of guys that like to run 25-pound tests. If you're fishing super clear water, if you feel like that fish can see your line, then yeah, you might want to go to a smaller line. I wouldn't go no less than 10-pound, 12-pound. The braided line I run is generally either 12 or 15. I don't go above 15. just because unless I'm flounder fishing, summertime stuff. But in the winter, you want to be able to cast a long ways. You want to be able to be somewhat sneaky if the wind's not blowing and it's quiet. So having a smaller diameter braid helps you get those long casts. A lot of those trout will come on the end of your cast, so that is important. But I don't have a preference. A lot of times I just grab whatever I can find on the boat. As long as I can get at least 18 inches of it, I'll be happy.
My next question would be the knot you use to tie the leader to either the soft plastic or the topwater. I mean, are you using some kind of loop knot, or do you cinch it down?
I do a loop knot. I don't know how well you guys will be able to see this, but I do a standard loop knot. You tie a dummy knot, a square knot, whatever you want to call it, just like that. I know you can't see that, can you? No,
not really.
Yeah, I figured so. But it's just a square knot. It's a loop knot. A lot of times the hard baits, I take the eyelet, the split ring off the eye. I don't necessarily think it hurts you having a split ring as a line tie, but I'm going to tie a loop knot on everything just because it's so quick for me to do, and I can do it blindfolded. So I take them off. I feel like I get a little bit better action on my baits. It's not much. You see, it's a little loop there.
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, it's a little loop. I usually do that on all my baits. Everything gets that right there, unless if it still has the line tie on it, the split ring, I will tie it straight. Fisherman's knot. Turn it 8 times, run it through there, and pull it back through, whatever you want to call it. But 95% of the time it's that loop knot, and that's on everything except to my braided line. My braid to mono is, I'm not sure what it's called. Maybe an Albright knot. I don't think it's the FG knot. I think it's the Albright knot. It works good. I generally, the only time I break off is when I get home. I don't lose a lot of fish. Well, you lose a lot of fish, but I don't lose a lot of fish due to break offs. We hadn't had no heartbreaking fish break us off in any of these tournaments we've been fishing in. I mean, it's important to know how to tie, but it's not important to know every single knot you could tie. I got 2 knots I tie. Been tying them for 4 years now. I'm pretty confident in them. It's everybody's personal preference, but I think it's the Albright knot and just the standard loop knot. I don't know the technical term for it.
All right, we are coming up to the end of your podcast time, but I want to get one more question out. And unfortunately, I'm not even going to give you a lot of time to talk about it. But while you were going over the baits, you were talking about one, like when you find the fish, and this is a better bait. So I'm just thinking about my audience. I'm thinking about people watching this podcast, or trying to get an advantage, trying to learn more. So they're not necessarily going to know where fish are. So why don't you talk just a little bit about, when you're searching water, like what you throw and what that looks like when you're in search mode? Because I'm just going to imagine most of my people are going to be in search mode.
Okay, so if I'm in search mode, I go to a creek I've never been to. I get to the back, if it's a 5-mile long creek, we'll say the last mile of it is the back. And it gets narrow, it gets deep. I'm going to probably start, if it's super cold and it's like 49 degrees, I'm going to go look for some deep water. If it's less than 55 degrees, I'm going to go look for, 7, 8, 9 foot of water, and I'm going to throw my jig. I'm going to use my depth finder, my side scan. I'm going to look for some life, look for some bait, look for some marks, and then I'll probably start fishing. Generally, if I go somewhere new, I get to an area that it looks fishy. I cut my side scan on. I get to going, whether it's in the middle or on the bank. A lot of people like to fish the bank. I like to fish the middle, especially if it's 6 foot. This fish could be anywhere. A lot of times they're going to be where that bait's at. So if you're seeing bait and stuff, I would immediately stop and start fishing. Usually I don't even start fishing unless I see stuff. And sometimes that hurts you as an angler because you just don't know. But recently I have been going to the back of these creeks and looking for the bait. It shows up on the screen. We'll start with a jig. We'll bounce the bottom a little bit. If we don't get nothing, we might go to a jerk bait just to see if those fish are kind of suspended in the water column. especially if you're around bait, you can see popping, like menhaden popping and mullets jumping out in the water. Odds are there's a trout somewhere around. Me personally, I like to throw those big swim baits, those 5 or 6 inch, the diesel minnows. You can rig them however you want, jig head, line through, whatever you want, and just chunk and wind, man. I something about this right here in the water constantly going will get a trout excited. And I use that a lot of the times. I'll go out. I don't have any right here beside me, other than those small paddle tails, but something like this guy with a larger profile tail that's really going to move a lot of water and waggle real hard. That's what I really like to use. And I'll just go down the bank. I mean, if it's deep, yeah, I'll get some casts over the deep water. But for the most part, I'm looking for something to give a dead giveaway. Hey, there's a trout in this area. You can stop and be confident from here on to the back, there will be trout. At a certain point, you'll get away from them, and then you get turn around and go back, and then you're back into them. So I like to do that. And then once you find an area, and you've kind of got a feel for how deep the water is over here and over there, and you know where the shallow part is, then you can dissect it a little more and use those different types of bait. Or you can go find those areas, and I would assume the most easiest bait to get is probably either menhaden if you can see them popping, or mud minnows and fish on the bottom, with live bait. That'll tell you real quick too. But the general rule of thumb is if you're in the back of a creek that far back and it's skinny and it's deep and there's bait fish back there, there's definitely going to be some trout back there. And they don't always feed, it's fishing. So you won't always catch them, but usually the paddle tails and the jigging is a good way to let you know, hey, there's some good eating size fish here. The larger fish is a whole nother,
Okay, man.
subject.
All right, so we are basically out of time, but I hate not asking a guest this question. So I'm going to give you literally a minute to answer this. And it is just man, any final thoughts, anything to get out there? We're here at the end of your podcast. And again, I'm going to apologize that I can only give you a minute to wrap it up.
I didn't realize you could talk about fishing for so long. The most important thing is just get out there and enjoy it. If you want a quick route to success, call a local guide. There's plenty of guys out there. Don't be scared to go fish where nobody's fishing. Those trout like to move and go to those less populated areas. Just have fun. It's a great sport. There's lots of fish out there. There's lots of different ways to catch them, lots of different places to catch them. It's not always what you hear and what you get told,
All right. Hey, Captain Zack Bland, UFO Charters, Pamlico River and its tributaries. It's a pleasure talking trout with you, man.
Thanks, guys.
Will do, man. We'll check in later.
See ya.
David Harden.
Hey, Gary.
Well, there you go, man. There's a conversation about trout.
There was a lot of trout talk.
There's a lot. Yeah,
A lot of trout. But you know what I got? I mean, I don't know what you'll think about this takeaway, but I really need to get a side scan sonar on my boat. That's probably my best takeaway because I don't have one.
Do you have any electronics on your boat?
I have some electronics, but not the side scan. And I think the side scan would be cool to have.
Do you use the current electronics on your boat?
I probably do, but probably not in the best
I'm hearing
way.
a lot of probablys.
Yes.
I'm just saying I'm hearing a lot of probablys.
You are. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, but as far as being part of the fishing boating community, I think it is my obligation to say, yes, you should go out and spend money and buy a side scan.
It's because Christmas is coming.
Yeah, and it's not like you didn't just spend some money on your wife's car.
That's right. If she's listening,
I will accept that as David's best takeaway. I think that is a fine David's best takeaway.
Okay, well, thank you.
Well, let's wrap this up.
All right. Well, let's thank our sponsors, Port City Signs and Graphics, YourBoatMoney.com, and New Coast and Marine Warehouse Center. If you would like to become a sponsor of this very podcast, just contact the Fisherman's Post office.
We're very appreciative of our sponsors. And if you enjoy these podcasts, please thank our sponsors for us. Please look at them because, we can't do this show without them. And one last plug for membership content. Again, podcast early release, podcast bonus content. We're going to continue our conversation with Zack Bland here right after we wrap this contest up. And then we also have premium fishing ports, video and audio delivery up and down the entire North Carolina coast, bi-weekly in the winter, and then weekly from spring to fall.